Hey everyone, so this is getting shareable content out the door quickly with data scraping, teamwork, and outsourcing. So brief introduction. I'm John Henry Scherck. It's me right there. I'm a web strategist, so I focused on marketing and ad tech. I don't focus on anything like links or SEO specific. All of my KPIs and metrics are tied to revenue, and really focusing on sort of all online channels for the e-commerce business of our company. I do this for traffic and lead gen and user acquisition for WP Engine. WP Engine is the world's largest WordPress hosting platform. We run WordPress the best. We're an optimized business for it. We're about 220 employees strong, based in Austin, Texas. We have I'm in the office in San Francisco. We have an office in San Antonio, and we just opened up London 2 weeks ago. And I do this through automation and outsourcing. I control our SEO, PPC, CRO, content marketing, and the overall management of our website. So it gets to be a lot to handle. And in order to scale and to be able to take on my work, I rely on a lot of automation for what I can and outsourcing for what I can't take on myself. So let's just dive right in. Whoops. No worries.
I was trying to get that to go a little bigger.
No, cool. As marketers, we can't be nebulous. I think that a lot of the times when we look at doing content marketing, we look at it as a cure-all solution for what we're trying to do, instead of actually thinking about what goes on and what's required for it. And really, we're thinking things like this. We really have no idea what we're doing, and I think that just going for content is a really nebulous way of trying to figure out your content strat, or figure out how you're going to grow your business, and relying on just stuff we don't understand and digital in general to grow our business without tactical strategy. And just doing that, or trying to follow what your competitors are doing, if they're creating infographics or doing a podcast and following your footsteps, is just going to get you killed. You need to blaze new trails and do things that no one else in your market's doing, and just keeping up with the Joneses is never really going to get you that far. So this is more what talking to your boss should sound like. You need to start with goals, measure everything end to end, come up with the right strategy and the right tactics to get you there, and really thinking about your goals from the absolute beginning. And whatever marketers should be saying is they need to figure out what they're trying to accomplish with the right medium and the right message to get there, not just doing content to do it. And you need to measure everything so that you can actually have some KPIs to report back on. So everything that I do, I try to work with what's called the GSOT framework. It's goals, strategies, objectives, and tactics. I'm not going to read all the fine points there, but this is really a guiding force in what I do. I really think that starting with a goal, figuring out the right strategy and the right objectives, and lining up all the tactics to get you there is really a sort of a surefire way to make sure that you're not just creating some nebulous content that's not going to go anywhere. So like I said, everything starts with a goal. So an example goal would be mainstream visibility for your brand. And let's say the strategy is to create one shareable piece of content, because everything's about that with sort of external content marketing now. And the objective is to earn mainstream and industry publisher placements. That's a Gutenberg press right there. I really like that picture. So the tactic is to create a unique data set that exposes a new relationship. So all data visualization, all data, really, it's a lot of times it's not something new, and that's really not, like, new information isn't what's special about it. It's looking at it from a different lens than everyone else is. So charting that data would be the second tactic that highlights that unique relationship that you found. And then outsourcing all the writing to a writer, and outsourcing all design to a talented designer. Whoops. So free design tools and bad writing are only going to get you so far. I think a lot of the times in our industry we try and lone wolf it and create our own infographic or create our own content piece, and it doesn't look great and it's poorly written. And I think it's because we try and get stuff out the door quickly on our own, and we don't rely on teams to do it. And it wastes a ton of time. I've easily killed 10 hours in Lucidchart trying to figure something out, and giving it to a designer is done in 15 minutes. And I really think that teams help you go the distance. Right now in my career, I'm really trying to figure out how to work better with sales teams and operations and HR, and give them all the support that they need. But I've really learned that working with a bigger team helps you go to the distance, because you get to play to your strengths. And everyone actually on the marketing team at WP Engine takes what's called a Clifton Strengths Finder test. And these tests are absolutely awesome. They let you know what are your core strengths, and everyone else that you work with core strengths. And we delegate throughout the teams and let people line up to what really is going to be their strongest suit. And I think really as technical marketers, our role is diving in head first and making sense of the data that's out there. So this is where the presentation is going to get a little tactical, and it's going to get a little bit technical. Data is all around us, and a lot of the data is overused and commonly cited. I think one for WordPress, because that's my industry, is WordPress is 23.5% of the internet. Sharing that data, making anything about that data is no longer, it's no longer sexy, it's no longer cool, it's a commonly stated fact. So the answer is really looking at either creating your own original data sets or looking at data that's already out there with a new POV. And that allows you to really go your own way. But doing this and creating your own data and finding new ways to look at things is kind of scary. And it's kind of dangerous to go alone. If you get, like, it's terrifying to release a piece of content and possibly get called out for having fraudulent data. But by having a clearly defined strategy with goals and clear directions on tactical execution, you can focus your efforts and minimize the risk of like failed or murky content, because there's nothing worse than producing something and just having it go flat. So this is the process in action that we use at WP Engine. I'm going to go with an infographic that we just released. It's about not that Shark Tank, but this Shark Tank. If you're not familiar with Shark Tank is a show where entrepreneurs come on and they offer up a slice of their business to like pretty notable entrepreneurs. At WP Engine, we specialize in high availability WordPress hosting, and we actually have had a lot of customers go on Shark Tank, so it was a good fit for us because they get like 20,000 concurrent users or so on their site at a time. And it provided the data for this asset. So we scraped together everything from seasons 1 through 5 and all the results. You can see in the first slide, that is, or the first part of the infographic, that's showing investors that have invested in businesses that have failed or sites that are no longer active. The middle slide is showing what platform they're on, so WordPress in the lead with Shopify behind. And the third slide up top, which is a little hard to see, is SSL versus non-SSL. And to understand really how to get this data, there's a ton of sites that cover Shark Tank that are out there, but some are more useful than others. And if you look at this site, it's seasons 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and it actually has investor data there. So finding those basically data creators is really valuable, but it's important not to just trust a single person who's blogging. Like, they might not be accurate, they might not be right. So we went for a few different data sources and pretty much scraped it all, sorted it all in Excel. I'm not going to go into how to sort into Excel or like tactical execution in Excel today. There's a lot of great resources on that, and that's in this deck. But I'm going to more talk about like the mind frame that goes behind collecting this data. So all in all, it took us 6 hours of searching, spidering, scraping to get all of the Shark Tank data together, and it created 2 data sets. This is the investor POV data set. So if you look, you can see, I think it's like row 22, 23, you can see a business listed twice, and it shows the individual investors. And then we also created a business POV data set, which shows each business once, and then how many times the investors have gone into it. Once we got all our data, we threw it into pivot charts. Pivot charts are the most flexible way to explore data visually. You just throw a few clicks, you can look at a data set in a totally different way. So this is showing the failed investors chart, and then this right here is showing everyone who's on a platform called WooCommerce who got a successful deal on Shark Tank. To look at how to sort of create charts in Excel and getting more comfortable with pivot charts, Annie Cushing, she's going to be speaking later today, has an awesome video on it, which is in this deck, and I'll put it up on SlideShare, but her entire blog is pretty much devoted to how to be awesome in Excel. For writing and design for the Shark Tank project, we hired out due to bandwidth. We just knew it wasn't going to be a priority, and we didn't have the time to do it, and we found a cheap and affordable source. But we provided extremely clear instructions. I think it's really important to remember that designers aren't data people, and writers aren't data people. And if you just give them an Excel sheet, they're not going to know what to do with it. So we provided extremely clear instructions with everything charted out. And then we let them, once we showed the relationships, kind of take their creative freedoms. It got some coverage. It got in Inc., it got in Entrepreneur, and it got in WP Tavern, which is sort of like the central news site for WordPress. It was a victory, but more importantly, it was a victory by data collection and scraping that took us very little time. And that scraping allows for scale. Because I manage a lot of different aspects of the business, I don't have time to devote like 40 hours to just collecting stuff one by one off a website. So this is where we're going to actually get into like how we collect this data and what goes into it. This is your tool belt. First, there's Screaming Frog. Screaming Frog is a tool I think a lot of you are familiar with, but it's the way that we use it is to basically spider a site and understand its architecture, because every site is built off of basically similar architecture and templates, and once we can understand the layout, we can pull all that data out for ourselves. SEO tools for Excel is really great at scraping either XPath or JSON, and there's a bunch of resources for there. It's not valuable to go into how to scrape XPath or JSON on stage right now. It's more something that I think you really need to kind of do for yourself in just like a sandbox Excel sheet. I know it sounds a little intimidating at first, but if you stick with it, read a few resources, you can figure this stuff out. It is super simple. Google Docs is also really good. It's super, super fast, way faster than SEO tools for Excel, but you can't pull a lot of data into Google Docs. They're a JavaScript application, and if you try and get like 10,000 rows of data, it will crash. You can handle a little bit more than that, probably 50. And then there's Outwit Hub, which is a tool I really like. This is the only paid tool, or Screaming Frog is also paid, but this is a paid tool. And instead of knowing XPath or JSON, you can actually just highlight code snippets and have it rip it down. And I'm going to give some more highlights, but these are all fantastic resources for how to do web scraping and data mining. I'm going to put this deck on SlideShare. There's links to all of it. But really, I know that some of you are being like, this isn't my job, this is SEO fundamentals, this is some technical stuff, and I don't really care. I think our job as SEOs or technical marketers is really to dive in and accept that and take that on. Like, there's designers on our team who get to do the design work, or writers on our team who get to do the writing. We are the data people. We are the ones who are in Excel, are in analytics all day, so we need to own this. And you don't need to be a full stack developer. That's not what I'm saying. There's a development job for that. However, it really does help to be able to read and fix front-end code when things get screwed up, or when you're launching an interactive and the CSS isn't working. To be able to dive in instead of having to contact a developer saves you a ton of time. But knowing what to scrape is just as important as knowing how to scrape. So right now we're going to kind of wrap our heads around like data collection and what scraping is all about. So every website is built on a template. And inside those templates, each page is unique. That's why a URL exists. It has some type of unique data. So if you can understand the templates that the pages are built off of, you can then pull that data down. So if you can make sense of the structure, you can unlock the data. And Chrome Developer Mode is really, really good for this. It breaks down sort of how the DOM works. And I'm just going to pull it up right here. So you can see that in the flower class, I believe it says flower name, and then it's, what is that? Peruvian lilies. So just by understanding the class name and that each of the flowers' names lives inside of a class, we can highlight that in Outwit Hub, pull it all down, and get every flower that's on Teleflora's site if we wanted to. You can also dissect sites based on their architecture. So Target.com is a really good example. They have a very SEO'd architecture, but all of their products live under the P category. And through basically ripping down everything that's in their product lists, we can basically scrape for unique attributes like their SKU numbers and their pricing, and figure out how they price all of their SKUs and if we're more competitive than them. So it's an absolutely awesome tool that allows for a ton of data collection at scale. And there's a little highlight. Like, it is, if you can comfortably read source code, you can scrape data in mass with Outwit Hub. And it's $99 a year. But really, it's about finding the raw data collectors in your industry, like that, because these tools aren't anything without the right data to pull down. So for us, that was that one guy, or a few different people's Shark Tank sites, where they pretty much cataloged the show and spent their time poring over it. They were hobbyists who really just had passion sites. We used that to fuel our data. And I think it's also really important to check out what others have done before you to make sure that you're not creating something that's already out there. This is a tool called Link Prospector by Garrett French. It's absolutely awesome. It's pretty cheap, and it just, if you don't want to manage proxies and want to pull down results from Google and see what else is ranking and see what else is out there, it's absolutely awesome for it. And then Google Scholar and Google News. I think Google Scholar is great for finding crusty data that you can look at through a new lens, and then Google News is really awesome for finding like what's happening right now. And then Talkwalker alerts. I stopped using Google Alerts a while ago. I don't trust them. I think they've gotten better, but I know that Talkwalker is just super on point, and I've had both set up for the same categories. Talkwalker comes in way faster. It also works in French and a few other languages. But really, the key is to strike while the iron is hot. I think that knowing that the right data at the right time is awesome, but once you have that data, it's a rush to get it out the door and to not mill on your creative asset. And more importantly, I think it's really crucial to divide and conquer. Once you get all this data, once you have everything going, it's time to split it up among your team and really let them see where they're going to be strongest. So with us, we have a writer who's a content guy. We have a designer. We actually use an outsourced designer for that one. But having it all split up instead of us trying, or instead of like the SEO team just trying to take it on their own, really helps us maximize our time. And if you can't divide, I really recommend outsourcing. It's definitely, it's always important to have a value on your own time, and if you end up dumping 10 hours into figuring out how an infographic should look when it's not your strong suit, that's time that could be well spent on better stuff. And if you cannot basically outsource, just pull an all-nighter. I think the Shark Tank thing was like 6 hours on a Saturday afternoon, and it came out pretty okay for us. So that is the top of the conversation. I realize that there's probably going to be a bunch of questions, so I want to do a pretty hearty QA. I also just want to do a few shameless plugs. We do have an affiliate program if you guys are solid marketers. The minimum payout's $200. The top payout can go up to $10,000. And if you're building your own content, you might want to try us out. WP Engine was nice enough to give out a coupon. It's SearchFest 2015, and you get 50% off the first 3 months if you want to try out our platform. But cool. I'm happy to take any questions if you guys have them. I flew through that really fast.
Hi. So you gave us some resources about scraping specifically. What are some other resources that you recommend to marketers that are don't consider themselves technical that want to kind of like jump in slowly?
I'd say like the first couple classes on Code Academy for understanding like basic JavaScript is really, really helpful. All of those like EDU courses that are going to teach like Udemy or Code Academy or anything like that, I think has been really helpful for me kind of wrapping my head around front end stuff. And I think it's a really great primer. Also, Growth Hackers, which is sort of a, I guess, a competitor to Inbound, is really valuable for finding some of the more technical marketing that's going on out there.
I'll ask a question while we're waiting for people to get ready to ask. You spoke about being careful not to give creatives just data dumps. Bless you, because I think that happens a lot. Can you talk a little bit about your process and how you help creatives take the great story that you're trying to tell with the data and help make that happen for them?
Absolutely. So once we have the data, we chart everything and we look at sort of what the most interesting relationships are going to be, and we pass it around to a few people and say like, is this data point exciting? And once we figure out really what are the most, I'd say like tantalizing pieces of data, we have a writer write up everything in our language. We have a pretty like, we have a way of doing things like a brand and a style guide, and generally we find that even when we send our style guide out to people, it doesn't capture the tone and some of the look and feel that we want. So we write everything down and we send them the text, and then we have them design around that. I'm confusing myself because we hired a writer, and before we're using an outsourced writer, and I found that now having that writer in-house to really capture our tone and be consistent has been really powerful. So working with him and showing him the data and showing what we have, and then expanding from there and providing really clear charting, and then just kind of letting them go on their own. We also do, showing up there, we do wireframes for all of our infographics. And before they go into production, we do like kind of a straw man of what it will be like. And once we approve of the straw man, that's when we actually put it into design. If we can't really grok it and it just doesn't look successful, we kill it.
Yeah. Does anyone else have questions? So I'm going to ask, when it comes to putting together, so you've worked with your creative team, you've put together this infographic. Can you speak a little bit about how, once you execute against that, how you can share the success with the people that you're reporting to, like what the dashboard looks like and what's the information that you're sharing?
So I think really what we look at is placement. So I mean, like I care about SEO, but I find that like bringing the SEO conversation into like C-levels is just kind of murky water. So we generally try and keep it to placement and then social reach. Social reach is, the way that we calculate it is you can rip down, I basically find everyone on Twitter who shared it and rip down all their follower counts and see how big their total audience would be. And that's an idea of like how many people could have seen it. And generally when you get some major influencers on there, like if Entrepreneur shares it, it goes way, way, way up. So it kind of lets you know like how many people could have seen it, like total reach is really what we're going for.
Excellent. Cool. Does anyone else have questions about how you guys are using marketing automation on your teams? And we have somebody in back.
Sorry, I came in a little late. What was the $99 a year program you mentioned? The slides are not seeming to be working today. So
no worries. Outwit Hub.
Outwit Hub?
Outwit Hub. It's the thing that's interesting about it is like it really hasn't made. There's some good tutorials on it on the Seer Interactive site, but it really hasn't like made its way into the SEO or marketer scene. It's really popular with journalists and like data journalism. And if you go on the forums and like see what people are talking about, it's generally all journalism people that are trying to figure out how to pull off a bunch of data from a website so they can tell a story. But I think it's going to become more popular over time now that it really does help scale. You can hook it up to proxies. You can do rate limiting so you don't just blast a site and get your IP banned. It's a really flexible, customizable tool. Cool.
Can you talk a little bit about how you see people abusing automation? I know I'd gone to a conference and this very, I'm sure, well-meaning person sent a LinkedIn invite through a marketing automation tool, and it said, "So great to meet you at blah, blah, blah show." And I had passed off my ticket to someone else, so it's like instantly that person individually gets kind of put into this, that's super spammy. So going back to the topic of marketing automation, it's not a strategy, right? It's a tool to execute against. So can you kind of walk us through maybe some pitfalls that we should avoid?
Yeah, I think it comes down to critical thinking. we released this interactive infographic a while ago, and one of it counts like how many new users. I think like one of the data points is how many new users Facebook gets a second. And we were looking at it, and then when you clicked over to see how many they got after a month, I think it was like more people than were in the world. So
Maybe not an accurate.
nah, that would be really good at Facebook. But it's understand and like looking at your data and just critically taking it in. I think like it happens like when you create your own like content, it's sort of like reading your own writing. You can miss your own typos unless you read it out loud and really take your time and ingest it like it's the first time you're seeing it instead of just like accepting it at face value. So really like taking a good hard look at your data and what you're presenting out there, because I mean, even if it's right, you'll probably get called out by someone for something. Like I've definitely had to repost some infographics after having them go up and being like, oh yeah, that data point was wrong. I strive to never have to do that, but it's happened in the past, and I think people are going to be scrutinizing it, and it's not just like accepted for face value. People really do want to understand it, and if the data seems off, there are just those people, like we've been in meetings with them, like that number doesn't seem right. Those same people are going to see your asset. Cool.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, first off, we're WP Engine customers, so thank you guys for all the great work you do. But also, kind of where you started from was this question of going after and looking at Shark Tank specifically, which I thought was a really cool idea. So before getting to the process of actually gathering data, could you take us through how you kind of do content ideation for new research projects or these new data gathering projects?
Mm-hmm. So I have a lot of alerts set up for like when things happen. Like the most, it's gonna come out in like I think next week, but like the latest thing we did was basically we try and try it into our values as a company. So like speed or basically like keeping websites up is a big value, and Shark Tank is a super demanding program to go on if your website's being featured. And for us, I mean, we just had a bunch of customers go on Shark Tank, and we had to do like emergency migrations to clustered environments, and I was just like, there's a story here. Like I think a lot of these Shark Tank people are using WordPress, and I think for me, I was just watching Shark Tank, and then I took one site and I ran it through Built-With, and I was like, oh, that is a WordPress site. And then I started looking at them a few times, and I just noticed that a ton of them were WordPress, and I was like, well, let's just run them all through Built-With, and that's kind of how we came to it. But I think we're always trying to look for things that will influence like speed or security. Something that we're releasing next week, which I'm really excited about, is we took a Gmail password dump and we ran all the Gmail addresses through the full contact API. So we're actually able to get people's identities based off the complexity of their password. So we have things like an editor of BuzzFeed's password and an IBM executive's password, and we're able to compare the complexities and see who has the most. I'm super excited about that one. But just being on the lookout and understanding, like, if we didn't know full contact, we wouldn't be able to do that. So understanding like what tools you have access to and what can help you scale, I think is really valuable. But it's just like, when 10,000 passwords get dumped on the internet, like that's a ton of data that you can go use. And if you're looking at security, that's just something to be aware of. So I have like just a crazy stuffed folder in my inbox of security alerts or like WordPress alerts or new data that comes out with that, or anything related to like SSL, like man-in-the-middle injections, and that can't like it happened a little bit too fast, but I would have loved to have done something with the fish thing, I forget what it was, but the Lenovo laptops where they had the Komodo SSL that was busted, forget something fish, but like that would have been awesome. And being on the alert for that and having those just fly into your inbox, and when one works, it just kind of sticks. But when it comes to finding like the new relationships, there's this book, I don't remember the title of it, it's not a very sexy title, it's like a technique for producing creative ideas. Richard Baxter's written about it a lot. He gave me the book. It's super valuable. And basically, it's this ad guy, and he talks about what you do is just immerse yourself in the data and just read it and just own it and live in that like pool of new information and absorb as much as you can, and then just walk away. And like this does sound like it won't work, but I swear it does. The idea will just come to you. Like you just mill it over in your head. I don't know. I'm the type of person who will keep thinking about things over and over again. And when that solid idea comes. Like for me, I was like WordPress and Shark Tank, that's it. And we knew that we were going to go and do that. And then I've definitely had some ones where I was like, no. And like trying to get it a little bit better and trying to kind of make it a better concept or look at it from a new angle. And generally, if like the whole team isn't excited about it, we can tell it's going to be a dud. So.
We got time. Yeah, go ahead.
We got some time.
We're going to get intimate, guys. Let's start raising hands.
So can you talk a little bit more about how you promoted it once you were done and maybe how you used marketing automation on the back end? I know you got some coverage in publications. Did you also use any marketing automation tools to promote it?
I use BuzzStream, which is an outreach tool, and it allows for mail merges. But really, the way that the best thing that you can do, and I guess some other people have talked about this in the past. I try to keep it focused, but really, before I do anything, I find someone who's written about something similar, and then I pitch them the concept before we go into production, and I make sure that the concept and the data has some validity behind it, and that they're actually interested in it. I think like it's really easy just to get anyone's email. Like they're on, like journalists have them on their Twitter handles or on their bio pages. Like you can find it. But I think like giving someone just a here you go isn't nearly as effective as like I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And they might tell you like not really, or like maybe it'd be better if you looked at it from this angle. And I think when you get a journalist to kind of give you their input, they feel like they had some part in creating it, and they're going to have more stake in the game and putting it up on the site. So we started with ink, and we got it in ink, and I wasn't super thrilled with the traction that I got from ink on its own. Did a small ad buy as well to our community. So like we have some pretty solid like retargeting groups, and we have one that's like who's on our platform and everyone, and really just blasting that out through retargeting and through so like Facebook and Twitter. And then we got some luck with cold pitching, and we sent it to Entrepreneur, and they picked it up as well. But they also have someone on their site that just writes about Shark Tank, and so finding that journalist I was like, why didn't I know about this guy? So really, I think finding the journalist who's like on the right beat is just as important. So when you do if you use like Link Prospector and scrape down similar assets. Just finding who those journalists are and then basically creating like a pitch pool out of those people is solid. And I generally go with like one standard, hey, I'm thinking about doing this, what do you think? And trying to make the email as brief as possible because they're flooded all day with random requests. And if they like it, it goes into production. But I try not to like personalize too much or spend a lot of time on making sure the outreach is just right and just tuned for that person, because I think that that's not really what they're after. Like they're not after like a love letter. They just want to know what you have and if they have something that they can promote so they can get page views.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on how marketing automation impacts the points on the sales funnel?
Oh man, yeah. So like, there's a ton of like other marketing automation that we do as a platform. That's more, I'd say, like built into the platform team. So it's not really like I wouldn't say it's like my area of expertise, but like for us, in terms of the sales funnel, like for shopping cart abandonment, if you sign up and you give us your name, the first form of our sign up page is a name and an email. And if you abandon to the second stage, you actually get a follow-up email. But we know your price point at that level. So someone who comes in at a $29.99 or $249 plan, they're going to get a nice email from our founder that's like, hey, if you have any questions, hit up our social media team. By the way, here's a bunch of cool things about our platform. If they're above if they're at a $249 level or above, they actually get assigned to someone in Salesforce and round robin through the Salesforce team, and then they actually try and set up an individual call with that person to get them on the platform, because at that rate, their MRR is worth it for someone to actually follow up. Like that's more like bare knuckle marketing automation, whereas I was like a little bit more on the SEO side here, but like for pulling people into the funnel as well, like I think just having retargeting groups based off of pages that you know are going to be like the right price point. And I mean, I know how long our sales cycle is, and I know when someone comes to our site, pretty much how long we have before they're pretty much a lost cause. So I really try and ramp up as much automated marketing as I can around that. And then there's certain things that we're trying, like parameters on PPC that are for higher intent terms, and just building retargeting groups off of those landing pages, things like that. But really, I think we try and automate like the lowest hanging, like acquiring the next to lowest hanging fruit.
While she's going to the back, I'm going to ask a question that was prompted by a prior question. When you talk about marketing automation and how this affects some of your link building opportunities, this passes the sniff test to me. Like it makes a lot of sense. These are really they're relevant, they're your target market. That's fantastic. Barry Schwartz in Search Engine Land last week shared some content from Mr. Mueller from Google saying, I wouldn't do link building as an effort, but we all know that this is still really important. Even if we quit using it as a ranking term, or I'm sorry, as a ranking factor, it's still important because that's where your target market's coming from. So can you speak to that? Like, how do you share from a scorecard perspective? Do you guys track that?
I don't put any merit into what Google says. Like, the asset got into Inc. and Entrepreneur. I don't care. Like, that's people who are going to buy stuff. Like, search is super important, but like, I think we can get our Google goggles on and forget that's
Absolutely.
that's a name brand placement for your brand. Like, that's a great site that adds some validity to your brand. It could rank for its term, for like your brand term, and add like social proof for when people are searching. I think Mueller's basically saying like, don't build comment spam. And I feel like Google would have no problem with this, but like they're gonna say a bunch of stuff, but I think basically just do whatever is right from a business perspective, not like Google's business perspective, and you're gonna be absolutely fine. Like, AdWords, different story, but when it comes to SEO, like, you can pretty much just do marketing and you're gonna be okay.
Yep.
So.
Thanks. We had another question in the back.
Hi, my name is Eliza Greenwood, and I was looking at Marketo and HubSpot. I'm looking for a job, and I'm interested in marketing automation, but I wonder if you have any suggestions of where to start. I know they both have certifications and trainings online, and I wonder what you would consider to be the most marketable for a job hunter.
Marketo is a build your own Ferrari kit. If you can build Ferraris, it's an amazing tool. It's just super complicated. You could get Marketo to a level where if like people visit 5 pages, you can have a 95% confidence interval that they will convert into a certain lead. Like, it's an amazing tool. It's way too complex for most businesses. I think to use Marketo, you need to have an extremely high LTV for your customers. HubSpot is we use HubSpot. I like HubSpot. I think that it is much easier to just like kind of grok it, and it works well with Salesforce, and it's much more user friendly. And I think that Marketo's super enterprise, and HubSpot can really, a small bakery can use HubSpot and be super happy on it. And I think that if you were looking for like where you can go in marketing automation and the tools that you can use to do it, I think that like HubSpot would give you a much wider range of like clients that you could approach.
I had a question about influencer identification. You mentioned that you use BuzzStream. There's some good data that indicates that if you share a piece of data with people who are influencers first, that it decays less quickly. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys seed your content and what your process is?
It's like we're in a fortunate space. Like, we're a 225 person company. We're a very big brand. We're the largest brand inside of WordPress that isn't the WordPress Foundation. So we have a lot of influencers that are on our platform that visit our site a lot or share our stuff, and they're just, WordPress is like a quickly growing, taking over the internet type of thing. So everyone's pretty excited about it, and people love that we're a company that's really supporting WordPress. So we kind of have those relationships built in already. So people do share our stuff, which is, we're in a fortunate position. I think that finding the influencers, when I have to kind of step outside my realm of like comfort and WordPress, I'm really nuts about Follower Wonk. I think it's a great tool. Finding like the segment of people that follow all 3 of major influencers and just like building off an audience of people like that is absolutely fantastic. But finding, you can definitely get a lot of false positives as well. I think, what is the tool? BuzzSumo is also really, really powerful for that, and I think it's great for showing sort of what influencers your competitors have.
You have other questions?
I have a question. As far as outsourcing, do you have any little known sources outside of Odesk or Elance that you go to for good hires?
The good people at CopyPress are really, really quick. They're a Florida-based firm. They do infographics for under $2,000. I use them sometimes. If we're on a time crunch, I think they're a really, really good firm, and they produce work at scale. So I've used them a few times, and I'm really happy with it. Other than that, I think, if 2,000 is like way too high of a price point, I know it is for some businesses, art students are fantastic. Like, you can get an art student for very cheap. It's going to take some time and some coaching because they're not exactly going to know what you're trying to produce, or they're not going to have a lot of familiarity with infographics. Whereas like the benefit for us using a team like CopyPress is that they absolutely know what they're doing, and they're very, very quick, and they know what the infographic is supposed to be and how big it should be and what the proportion should be so it works on mobile. Whereas if you're working with a designer, you're going to have to, I think, spend a lot more of your time. So it's whether you want to devote that time to education and get a cheaper overall rate, or save your time and just pay for the overall outsourcing and sort of that domain knowledge of what comes with creating shareable content. I think it's really two different ways to go about it, and it's how you want to value your time and how much time you think it'll take you to, kind of pass those lessons on to the designer that you're working with.
What about writers? Is there a critical price point that you found that you're getting a quality writer versus?
Writing, like, you get what you pay for with writing. I think that really, I'm not comfortable with like any of like the farms that just churn out content. I think for the most part they've been pretty weak. I think like our industry did a really good job of making them write terribly with SEO copywriting and like pumping out cheap pages. So because we used a lot of those writing sources for quality over quantity, I think we've ruined a lot of like the online marketplaces for content. So I really try and go with local talent, with writers. I think design is something like you can just pass on a design brief and people can get it. They can look at the hex colors and use your right brand's colors. Writing is a little bit more complicated. Now that we have a full-time writer on our marketing team, I love it. It's been really valuable because he's not only learned our tone and brand perfectly, but he's built and expanded on it, and I think that's been really valuable for us. I think if you change your writing style a lot, people aren't going to get a sense for your brand, so really owning that tone and expressing yourself effectively isn't something that, I don't know, basically you can't outsource giving a shit is what I'm trying to say. It's just people they're not going to work
Somebody
that hard.
please tweet that.
But yeah, I think it's really a get what you pay for kind of thing.
Question back there.
So when you're compiling data for those C-level people with a piece of content similar to an infographic, how long do you give it before you kind of assume it's stale and then you can compile to say this piece did this well?
30 days. I just do a 30-day post-mortem recap for all my stuff. And you can do, like, we've had some assets that like are super embeddable, but they're just not like big showstoppers, and those like will come back and visit in 6 months and like take another look at it. And I think it's valuable to do that with your assets too, because I think especially in a business setting, like no one thinks about content but us. And if you're on a larger in-house team, to be like, oh no, it's still actually working. Like that thing that we spent a ton of time on 6 months ago is still providing results for our business, and reminding the company of that every few months when you're doing like I don't know, we do like a funnel meeting, and I'd say like every probably 4 months, or 3 months probably, so once a quarter, look at sort of how our content's done and what is producing results for us and what's getting shared, what our most popular pages are, and just sort of giving a brief to the entire company of sort of how the website's operating and what's working for us. However, the website is absolutely critical for us, and it's where all of our business functions happen. So if you're not like a very digitally focused business, that might not be sort of what the executives are looking for.
This is so much fun. I feel like I'm getting to do a one-on-one Q&A. This is great. You guys do feel free to ask questions. I'm just jumping in when you guys don't have questions, but I'm hoping that the questions I'm asking are helpful for you guys too. Otherwise, you can lock it down.
You
Take the mic
basically
away from me.
covered this in your presentation already, but I'm just curious if you would give us a step-by-step on every piece of your process.
Ooh, okay.
Wow, I gave you the gauntlet and you just threw it down. Thanks. Sorry about that, dude.
Okay, no worries. So
Good question.
I'd say the first thing that we do is really like it's about finding that inspiration once we hit that inspiration point. So I'm just like, I don't know, I think a mark of like good marketers or good creative people or just anyone is constantly consuming content. I spend a lot of time like on social, reading. I follow like, I like to see what other people are putting out there. So like The Verge or TechCrunch or like basically sites that I want to get on, I read a lot and I figure out what they're covering. And then once I find that piece of data and that inspiration, it's pretty much like, is this something that we can outsource? And once we start collecting the data and we actually have it, so spidering, scraping, all that, that's sort of the process that I own. And then once we have the data, we look at what it actually is, because before we pulled that Shark Tank data down, like everyone could have been on Shopify, and it would have been the worst asset for us ever to put out there, and a great asset for Shopify. So then we look at the validity of the data and kind of see what matters, and if it's like juicy and something that people will share and care about. And if we measure that validity, then we pitch it to a journalist. From there, we break down and start charting all the data and get sort of the final data points into the chart that we want once we know that it's going to be a successful asset and we've gotten some feedback from journalists that they care. So then we go into wireframe mode. From wireframe mode, those are sort of like where they take our charts. Once the wireframe looks solid, and we've also, the writer's been working on this simultaneously as well. Once that occurs, that's when we kind of see our V1, so like sort of a straw man with very basic stuff, and then we look at it on how it'll look on a mobile screen and how it'll look on a tablet and how it'll look on a desktop. I think that if you really don't consider like readability on mobile, your asset's toast. And that's something I've had to learn the hard way in the past. But once we know that it's going to look solid, that it's easy to sort of take in all that information, that's when we move it into like actual design work. And by the way, like while we've been doing this, every key stakeholder's been brought in. So like creative director's given his blessing. Social's like, yeah, we can totally promote this. This goes with our brand great. Writers like, the language is perfect. Thanks. Glad they filed the style guide if we decide to outsource the writing, even though that's something we do pretty rarely. But from there, once we have that sort of that final infographic, we don't just like put it up on the site. We have a meeting with field marketing, with sales, with everyone, because like we have live chat on our site, and a really big asset could drive a ton of irrelevant chat, mess up our sales queue. So we prepare answers for people that are like when we launch content that are like, hey, what are you guys doing and why did you make this? So our sales team knows in advance that the site's going to have a lot of extra traffic on it that might lead to some relevant questions. And then we also make sure that our customer experience team is aware of it, and we can share it with our entire customer base via an email. We generally try and get our product launches to go into, or excuse me, not our product launches, our content launches to go in tandem with like customer emails that are coming out, and that let people know about the platform so they can see what we've done, check it out, share it, so we can get basically all of our people who are on our platform and like a fan of our brand to promote it out there and hopefully give it sort of that big, like wider spread. We're still testing whether or not it's more valuable to promote like the placement or us. So, I think like whether we want to promote the infographic or whatever we've done on our own blog, or if we want to promote like the ink piece that it got placed on. That's still something that we're trying to figure out, and we're not sure sort of what gets more reach or if it's more valuable for us. I do like, we have some pretty like top of funnel retargeting campaigns. So I do like sort of driving the traffic to us, because then I can get people in, download a book, get them the email, get them on a drip campaign, and hopefully get a portion of it on the platform. Cool. What was that? Copy press.
So Tim, I think, brought up a really good point that search, how many people would consider themselves search marketers in this room? How many people would consider themselves inbound marketers or content marketers? So, as you know, we have a lot of different names. You kind of shared that in your bio, that you've gone from search to technical and really embracing content. And Tim Mayer in our keynote had mentioned that search professionals are in a really unique position, and that we know a lot about the funnel, we know a lot about intention and relevance and resonance. Can you talk a little bit about how you feel marketing automation can help us as search marketers to kind of go into this new space to do exactly what one of the attendees was asking, like how do I do this really well? How do I learn these automation techniques?
I mean, I think we forget just like how much knowledge that we have as individuals. So things like being able to get every news mention that a competitor's had for like the last year is super easy if you can scrape some like search results. And just the ability of like, oh, you want to see, or like looking at every major link that a competitor's ever gotten through a Majestic download. Like people, a lot of people don't understand that like that data is there, and just by letting people know like the access to the tools that you have and the APIs and the automation and the data that you have alone can do it. Like our sales team does a ton with SEMrush, and just like getting data through that and figuring out sort of like who's growing, who's expanding. So I think that and just introducing them to SEMrush, they were like, wait, we can figure out who's buying ads. We have data on who's spending money on advertisements. That is fantastic. So just I think that, and also there's a tool called Zapier, and I think that's like one of the best marketing automation tools out there. It's basically like a bridge to bridge for APIs, and showing people like, no, you do not need to upload the leads from that landing page software into HubSpot or whatever, and just being like, oh no, it bridges immediately, frees up an hour of your work. And I think if you really want to try to automate and like see what's going on with scraping or trying to free up more people's time, I think it comes down to just finding like the patterns of what they do in their day-to-day job that is sort of like redundant, monotonous work. I think like a lot of us have a really good handle on how to speed up our processes and be really efficient, but like not everyone is reading the same stuff that we're reading, and they focus on different things. And I think if you can bring some of that domain knowledge over to the rest of your team, that's a really great way to just sort of make everyone more efficient, automate tasks that are redundant, and not waste time on data entry, because that's the biggest waste of time that you can have.
You talked a lot about integration of your team. It sounds like you guys have a really good connection between search and your paid teams and your creative teams. Raise your hand if your team that you work with the integration is perfect. You don't need any other integration points. You're never siloed. Raise your hand. Nobody.
I'm not going to raise my hand either.
So as we all know, Harvard Business Review actually said this is the biggest issue facing agencies right now and facing brands who work with agencies, is there's so much fragmentation and so much siloing. Can you talk a little bit about how either your past experience, how that was bridged, or how you guys have bridged that at WP Engine?
So I'm actually a remote employee for WP Engine. My entire team is based in Austin, Texas, and I'm in San Francisco. So we rely heavily on Google Hangouts and just like keeping video live. There's this tool I really want to get called Perch, and it's just basically video-to-video conferencing between offices at all times, so you can just kind of see what's going on. Like I'd love to be able to like wave to the London team and then wave to the Austin team. That's kind of a dream though. But also chat software like Slack or HipChat is super, super valuable, and I think Slack is great because it gets rid of like attachments, and you can just kind of like, by sending wireframes super quickly or like snippets of code, you can just, instead of being like, let me email that to you, it's just instant right there. I think that, but really like working on a team successfully is not just like sharing what domain knowledge you have, but also understanding like other people's goals. Like links are great, but if they come from terrible sites, like it's that like are negative about your brand, or aren't promotional, or just are off brand for you, not something you want to be related to. Like that's a loss. So I really think like not trying to get wins at the expense of your brand is a great way to kind of stay in like your team's guidelines. But when it comes to working together and automating as much as you can, and just, it really all comes down to solid communication and keeping solid communication on. Like email's great, but I generally just tell people to call me, like if it's complex, and just get on the phone. And really just keeping that like human, like you can automate a lot, but you can't automate the human out of like what you do. And I really think like, like when you make an amazing piece of content, no one's going to understand like what its potential is, how it can be promoted, why you need budget for it. And I think explaining to other parts of the business, like, so I will share, like, since we've done that Shark Tank infographic, we now host a lot more Shark Tank sites, and we're seeing people come over to us much more frequently. So understanding like how that can be leveraged from a sales collateral perspective is also really valuable. So like our account managers or our sales guys will be like, well, actually we host a ton of these sites, we keep them up, you can actually see the uptime statistics from that asset, and be like, here, everyone on Shark Tank is going on WordPress. WordPress is the right move for your business. So letting people sort of like PBS, not PBS, excuse me, NPR has this thing, COPA, it's create once, publish everywhere, or COPE. And I think like once your assets are done, understanding how they can be used by the rest of the team or the rest of the organization is really, really valuable.
Nice. You have one back there? Oh. So you're speaking about I like that, I had heard that before, the create once, publish everywhere. There's a concept in content marketing that's content pillar. So basically, you're creating a single piece of content, like an ebook, and then you're using different parts of that for different channels to help amplify that story. Can you talk a little bit about how you guys do that?
Yeah, so I think, well, there's this new tool out called Bizzo, and I'm super excited about it. It's a retargeting technology that works with the LinkedIn network, so you can actually retarget people based on their job profiles. And so we have a bunch of different personas that shop for us. We have developers, we have CMOs, we have CTOs, CIOs, head of security. So actually changing the messaging and changing the download pages with sort of dynamic text to reflect sort of their persona is one way that we go about that. I think it's, you know, I'd say that's probably like the best sort of way that we go about addressing that off the top. But I mean, as a company, I'm definitely looking to dive more into that.
So one reason why you're here is we're at SEMpdx, we've always been really impressed about the resources that John Henry uses. My head kind of spins sometimes when he talks about a tool, and you can tell he dives in and uses it and dives back out really quickly. It takes a while to catch up, but super impressed with the amount of resources that you use, and I think it makes you strategic, but it also makes you agile. Can you talk a little bit about like favorite resources? I know you've mentioned a few, but
Yeah.
I'd love to hear like John Henry's top 10.
Man, so not all these are things that we use at WP Engine. I'm just going to take sort of like what I really like. When it comes to building email lists, BuzzSumo from Noah Kagan, like the AppSumo team, it uses what's called exit intent technology. So if you're going to break the browser plane, so if someone's going to leave, the screen will basically black out and they'll be met with a form field to capture their email. That's super, super valuable for funnel abandonment or sales abandonment. Screaming Frog is an absolutely awesome tool, just as long as you don't hammer sites with it. And then Outwit is something I use all the time. URL Profiler is absolutely amazing. You can use regex to rip phone numbers out of sites using URL Profiler. So if you're trying to get like a lead list together, it's absolutely amazing. Yeah, Link Prospector is fantastic because I don't want to manage a bunch of proxies. BuzzStream for keeping people sort of in line and actually knowing who I've reached out to. And then Excel. I think I probably always have Excel open. It's a super powerful tool. You can import the like Moz metrics, Majestic, whatever you want in there. And I think a big part of, it's not really automation, but just, I think you can waste a lot of time in web apps and like pulling data and looking up a singular URL. And when really all you're after is like the raw information. You don't need like the pretty graph. So just ripping all that information down into Excel and spending less time in web apps is a great way to sort of free up your time and not have to manage so many passwords. Cool.
So I want to thank our moderator, walking around speaker, Dave Storms. Thank you so much. Is everyone doing okay with the Wi-Fi? Everyone knows that it's SEMpdx and 2015 is the password. We're going to have a quick break here, and then we'll be going into to one more session. And again, as Alan had urged, please do include information about the survey. And can I get a quick hand of people who are SEMpdx members? Raise your hand. Yes, that's awesome. So yeah, we'll give a quick shout out for that. That's awesome. As the members know, but people who aren't members may not know, SEMpdx also has monthly educational events. They're fantastic. Last month, Casey Henry spoke about video marketing, really deep dive, wonderful. Josh Patrice, who is one of our attendees today, spoke to us just a couple months ago, and about images and how we optimize for a lot of different assets. So I think SEMpdx does a great job of taking a topic and doing a deep dive. So for those of you who aren't members, absolutely encourage you to become members. You can go to the fun speaker happy hours that members get to go to, but also so you can get a reduced price on the monthly educational events. And again, thank you guys so much for your attention, and please thank John Henry Scherck.